Robert Plank Show, episode 163. Business is people, and people are of value. Fight fear, doubt, and worry with sympathy, empathy, and compassion with Michael Ross. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Robert Plank Show. This is the podcast where we talk about building a business and making money. Our guest today is Michael Ross. And you know what? One of my favorite shows, or I guess not favorite, but guilty pleasure shows is on the USA Network. It's called Suits. The main character is named Mike Ross, so I think we're off to a good start. So this Michael Ross is a business owner and published author from Ohio. He is an expert in character training and is a certified coach, teacher, podcaster, and speaker. He has one mission: to help people live fulfilled and impactful lives. So, Mike, how are things today?
I'm great, Robert. It's great to be with you today.
Cool. I mean, the feeling is mutual. So, as far as like what it is that you do, what makes you stand out? What makes you different and special?
So, what makes me stand out is, I think the main thing is I truly have a heart to see people live fulfilled and impactful lives. 17 years ago, I was on a jail cell floor, and it was of my own account. I wasn't charged unduly. I did commit crimes, and I was a person who spent the first half of his life taking from the world and trying to get everything that I possibly could. And I had a mentor come into my life, and he looked at my blame list, and he looked at my life, and he told me I could be something special, and he really believed in me. It was the first time somebody outside of my family had really looked into my eyes and showed me with their whole heart and soul that they believed in me. And so I began to believe in myself. And the main thing that I learned through that was what makes life worth living and what gives you a fulfilled, impactful life is not what you get, but what you give. And so from that time, I've spent the rest of my life since that time giving to others. And man, it's been awesome. So if that makes me different, that would be the main thing right there.
I mean, I think it does. I think that's a pretty cool message. So, I mean, if someone was at that point, right? Like, I mean, as you can think about, like the crossroads or the turning point or whatever. If someone's at that point where they're like you said, like they're all take and no give. I mean, first of all, how would someone know that they are in that situation? I mean, do you think that when you were in the jail cell and up until things had to change, did you know that you were on the wrong course, or did you think everything was okay? Or I mean, you know what I'm asking? Like, how does someone know if they
Yeah.
are Mike Ross maybe a year before the jail cell?
Yeah. So, no, I didn't. I didn't think I was the problem. I thought the world was the problem. I thought the police were the problem. I thought my parents didn't raise me right. I thought the educators didn't educate me right. I thought the politicians were all crooked. I thought that big business was evil. I thought, wealthy people were evil and, poor people were evil because they didn't try. And so I had this blame list a mile long. I even blamed the weather. You're in California, you barely get any rain, but where I'm from, we get a lot of rain. And so, I used to blame the weather for my bad attitudes. And what I really had to realize more than anything else was you don't become a man. You don't truly become a man, or you don't become an adult, I should say, man or woman, until you take absolute personal responsibility for everything that happens in your life. And when you do, things start to change. And so now I do have a list, but the only person on that list is me. And I learned that from my mentor, where I began to realize that if I put myself on that list, on my blame list, well, then I'm not going to look to outside sources, number one, for my successes or failures, but I'm also not going to look out to other people when things don't go exactly according to plan. And so I started to look to myself, and so ingenuity came with that. And so I began to learn how to solve problems, and not just for myself, but now having clients all over the United States and some throughout the world, I'm able to offer solutions for them as well because I take it upon myself.
Awesome, because you've been there. You didn't just do some studying up on some facts and figures and reteach it. You've actually lived it. And I mean, what I'm hearing, I mean, I've heard a couple of times already that, there was the blameless. And what I was hearing is as you were kind of going through that, you said, maybe it's my family, maybe it's the police, the government, the weather, and it's like, so I guess if someone took a hard inventory of what they blamed, it's like, well, if you're listing 50 different things and leaving yourself out, well then, is it more likely that all these other 50 factors all somehow like in a coincidence all ganged up against you? Or maybe is it that the one sore thumb sticking out and all this stuff is you? Maybe you're the problem. And then I'm also hearing that like when you had the blame list, it was easy to just push your problems off on other people, right? Like, okay, well, my life isn't where I want to be. What's because of all these things? I don't have any responsibility. And then once as you said, you manned up, become an adult, whatever the politically correct term for that is, and you
Yeah.
began taking the responsibility, then you were able to figure out, what you could control. For example, the weather. Well, you can move somewhere else. You can be okay with where it rains. You can, all these different options. And then because you were able to think through and maybe knock down each of these issues in whatever way that you could control, then you were able to break that cycle of of ignorance and denial and just kind of being happy being miserable, I guess you could say.
Yeah, yeah. Some people aren't happy unless they're miserable, and I could say, for a period of time at least, I was one of those people. And Robert, you made some great points there. I think, I think at that point in time, because I had this blame list, we have a thing in our brains called the RAS, which is the reticular activating system, and that's basically our filter for how we see the world. So if I constantly am filtering through negativity, well, I'm going to find the silver lining, or I'm going to find the cloud in every silver lining, so to speak. I'm going to find the negative in every good thing that can possibly come into my life. So uh, the police are good, but I was looking at how they restrain me. The government is very good, especially in the United States of America. We live in one of the greatest countries for opportunity that you can find, but I could say there's no opportunity because that's just how I chose to see the world, and so there was no opportunity for me. I could blame my parents who taught me nothing but great things growing up, but I could blame them for not teaching me the handful of things I thought I needed to know. And so I filtered the world through that. And so, yes, did it work against me? Absolutely. But it was more on my perspective than anything else. And so, once that changed, once I started to see, first of all, myself in a different way, and that's ultimately, Robert, what it comes down to is, I saw myself as a worthless pile of junk. And so when my mentor came along and he said, "You're a masterpiece. You've got great things to offer the world. I see gifts in you. I think you're special. I think you could do great things." Once I decided to look at myself in a different way, well, then I looked at the government and the police and the entire world in a different way. And so I started to find opportunity versus blame. And that's ultimately when I became a man and when I started to decide to give instead of just try to get.
So I mean, I'm hearing two things from that. I'm hearing number one, so like a lot of people have low self-esteem and they don't even realize it. Like
Yeah.
there's all this blame, there's all
Hmm.
this anger, there's all this whatever, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
you're blaming everyone else because you don't even respect yourself enough to own your problems and fix them. And then the other thing I'm hearing is that that a big change for you was to have a better sense of optimism. That like you said, like there's the cloud and the silver lining. It's really easy to say, well, nothing's going my way because of all these things. Or you could look at it and say, well, we're living at in the best period of time so far in human history. Like lifespan's the
Mm.
best, quality of life's the best. Are there issues? Are there problems? Is it imperfect? Sure. But as far as, in a lot of ways, like, we all lucked out as far as, we could have been born in whatever time in human history. There were who knows how many,
Hmm.
10 billion sperm swimming through, and somehow we're the one sperm that made it and, grew up and stuff. And so yeah, so I mean, would you say that, was that, so that whole thing of, getting the better perspective and overcoming the negativity? I mean, is that all of it? Is that the big picture, or was that the first step of many? Or like, I mean, what was your process towards digging yourself out of that hole, so to speak?
Yeah, it definitely was the first process. I mean, I wrote a book called A Clear View, which is unleashing the power of a positive self-image. And it's just basically, once you can see yourself with value, most people don't value themselves. In fact, the statistics show that 85% of adults have a negative self-image. And so if I don't value myself or put a value on myself, well, then I don't value the choices that I make. And our choices ultimately determine our destiny. So people oftentimes they judge themselves, or they put a value on themselves based upon what they do. So a person, for instance, who's a heroin addict, right? I've heard people say this about others, and it just drives me crazy. They'll say, well, that person's a piece of garbage. Or somebody a politician makes a bad decision. Well, that guy's a piece of garbage. You've heard this yourself, right? People call somebody a piece of garbage based upon the choices that they've made. But you cannot put a value on human life. I mean, that's one thing that's great about America and many countries in the world. You put high value on human life because it is the greatest value in existence. But if we put a value on other people based upon the choices that we make, well, then we can start to create delineating lines, and we can create stereotypes, and we can create prejudice. And so what we've got to understand as individuals is we cannot put a value on our own lives. It is beyond measure. And if people understand the treasure that they are and the true value that they have, well, if I understand that I'm a masterpiece, well, then I'll make choices that are aligned with me being a masterpiece. I'm not going to make choices. If I think of myself as a heroin addict, well, I'll make choices based upon what a heroin addict would do. So those things are symbiotic. So yes, to say that's the starting point, you better believe it, because after I started to put a value on my life, where I didn't think I was just a criminal and a waste of life. Once I started to say I have value, well, then my choices followed that. And so even the thought that other people have value and entities have value, when I started to realize that, then my choices came in alignment with that, which exploded my life into change, which gave me the heart and the effort to learn all I could, to get all the experience that I could, to serve all I could, to get to the place where I am today. And I promise you, I didn't try to get to where I am today. It just happened as a result of me going after the value that I was and the value that other people were, showing them their value. And so it created a business and multiple entities now for me, books. I never expected to be where I'm at today. But to say that, yes, it absolutely starts with our own self-image and saying that I have value, and then aligning my actions with that value.
And I mean, you were kind of blowing my mind here, Mike, because the first thing that I'm hearing is that a lot of people, and I guess we all fall into this sometimes, but especially if we're at a really low point, is a lot of us just kind of take a shortcut and assign labels to things. Like you said, the label of a heroin addict, or maybe someone might say,
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm a procrastinator, I have
Yep.
entrepreneurial ADD, and my thought in that is, well, if you label yourself that way, then that's almost guaranteed. If you're like a little bit of a procrastinator, if you're like, a procrastinator 20% of the time, and you say I'm a procrastinator, then now you're pointed in the direction of becoming a procrastinator 50%, 70%, 100% of the time. So it sounds like people need, first of all, better
Mm.
labels, because if they just kind of give into the darkness or whatever you want to call it, and you assign
Mm-hmm.
a bad label, then you're just guaranteed to keep going and rolling down that hill. And then the other thing I'm hearing that kind of relates to like the self-esteem and the optimism thing is that you said, you keep saying that other people have value, and that relates, because it's like, well, if we assign a better label, or even just don't even have a label, if we can shed that whole thing of, like, I'm a heroin addict, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm a screw up. If we can just stop doing that, then it sounds like that will kind of bleed over into the rest of the world. And if we treat ourselves better, then we treat everyone else better, then they treat us better back. And it just
Mm-hmm.
sounds like by just making a few small changes and doing things a little differently than maybe the way we've been doing, then it'll just have all these other unexpected effects.
Yeah, you better. That is such a great perspective and outlook. And that's, it starts, there was a psychologist. His name was Ivan Pavlov, and I'm sure you've heard of him. He was the one who came out with classical conditioning, which has turned into labeling theory. And basically is people, they do what they're conditioned to do based upon what they've told themselves over and over again. So one thing is we've got to separate that we are not our thoughts. We're also not our history. I had to realize that yes, I did spend time in jail. Yes, I was a drug addict. Yes, I was a violent person. I was a nasty, manipulative person, but I am not my history. Those were decisions based on hurts that I had when I was a kid. And most people grow up, and adults, by the way, think about adults, you get into corporate America and you get into other, become an engineer, you can become a radio host, or you can become anything that you want. And most adults, what they do is they're really good at masking the hurts and pains that they've had. And so what they do is they condition themselves for success in a lot of ways. And that success can become an addiction in its own right. But that labeling, as you were talking about, is really, really one of those things that we have to be careful of. And what you said about, I am this. So let's say a business deal doesn't go your way. It's really easy to go, well, I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. I'm not special enough. They need somebody else. I'm not good looking enough. We go through a whole list of things that we start to beat ourselves up for. Well, that is our mind. That is just our mind thinking. And that's our mind throwing out all sorts of blame, fear, doubt, and worry. We are not our thoughts. Our mind is a factory, right? But we have an essence as human beings. We have an essence that makes us what we are. And what we have to do is we have to live out of that essence. And that essence is when you're at complete peace and you're present and you know exactly who you are. It's almost, exactly what you're made to do. But what you'll always come up against is your mind is built for survival. So your mind is going to constantly try to attack the ideas that your essence has, because your essence will want to risk. Robert, you've done some great things in your life. I've read your bio and your books, and you've done a lot of great things for a lot of great people, offering them opportunity. But I'm guaranteeing there's been times in your life where your mind has tried to say, Robert, you can't do this. You won't make it. People don't want to hear what you have to say. And there was something inside of you that fought so hard against that, because your mind is built for survival. So your mind is always going to take the cautious route, but your essence is always going to do what's best for who you really are. And so you have to be aware of those labeling theories, and you have to be aware of those words that you say to yourself constantly, because that will keep you from your ultimate destiny. We are not our history, but we have to take our history in the context of what our destiny is. And that is so key, is that we go against those labeling theories that are constantly being told to us in our own minds.
I mean, that makes so much sense to me. And as you were explaining all that, especially the part about how our mind is built for survival, I mean, it's making all these connections with me, because I mean that makes a lot of sense for me, as far as it's easy to latch on to the negative stuff, right? I mean, whether it's, the news or politics or someone complaining, and it's like one of those things, especially for online business. Like, I think about if someone complains to me or about me or trash talks me or refunds me, like if it feels like it's 20 times what it is, compared to if someone says something nice to me, that seems like just a really small problem. And I've never realized why that was until you just said there, like, if your mind is built for survival, then of course your mind is going to be noticing the dangers more than the good things, because if we're programmed for survival, then we're like, okay, if something good happened, that's great, but I don't need to pay any more attention to that. I don't need to fix that, because that's not endangering me. But then if there's something really big and bad on the horizon, like if you're a caveman and the mammoth's charging at you, that requires my attention, because that's a big bad thing coming. And it sounds like that worked well in caveman times, but now that we're out of the survival stage in human evolution, right, and now that we're we have the internet, computers, cities, whatever. Now we kind of can become more enlightened and do what's more important as opposed to just getting by, staying alive, struggling. Live one more year before the big mammoth eats you. Now we can focus on how we can help others, how we can help ourselves and make everything a better place. Not to get too hippie on you.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, if you really think about it too, Robert, as far as getting along with each other, like I'm a business and life coach is one of the things I do, but I'm an author and speaker. Those are the two main things that I've dedicated my life to doing because I found what my strengths are and I want to stay there. And so speaking and writing are my two favorite, and networking. But that comes along with the territory. But if you think about it, business. If someone wants to be successful in business, especially in the capitalistic system, right? If you treat business as just people and people are just business, if you take people out of business, there's nothing. It doesn't matter what product or service you offer. Apple has some of the greatest products in the world. You take people out of the equation, you have nothing, right? You have a product and that's it. And you got empty warehouses. But if people really understand that, first of all, they are of inherent value and that other people are of an inherent value, but they also understand that people's minds are built for survival. What ends up happening from the person who understands that and knows that the person they're talking to, it does not matter what masks they put on the outside. It does not matter if a person comes in with a big suit, a three-piece Armani suit and drives the Mercedes-Benz S-Class and comes in well-spoken and educated. That person has gone through pain in their life, and they are given into fear, doubt, and worry just like anybody else. And if a person in business, for instance, will understand that and use the tools of sympathy, empathy, and compassion and work with a person who's a little crass, and will work with a person who's maybe a little afraid, and will reassure them that they're going to do everything in their power to protect them and to give them the best quality and the best service they possibly can, bar none, regardless of what happens. And they look and they say, this person has been through some things. I'm going to be here to walk alongside them, to work with them. You cannot help in a capitalistic system. If you do business that way, with really trying to understand where somebody else is at, you cannot help but have success. You cannot help yourself. If you take care of people, money takes care of itself. And I think that's so key, especially for the capitalistic system, that people get back to taking care of people as their first priority instead of achieving. You can get all the awards and all the money in the world. And trust me, I've been very blessed in what I've done. And I tell you this, the success as far as achievements and money mean absolutely nothing. At the end of the day, they're empty. But what really makes the biggest impact in the world is when you have enriched the lives of others. And that's where, in a capitalistic system, if you make your focus enriching the lives of others and understanding that people have gone through so many things in their life, and you can be there as an advocate for them, you cannot help but win in business. And the key to that is that everybody wins at the end of the day because you're in it for the right reasons.
And that's awesome. And as you were explaining that, I was just kind of thinking about different things. Like, for example, like if you're driving a car and you're about to make a left turn, right? You're looking ahead at where you're going to turn onto. Or if you're playing like Little League baseball or something, and you're at bat and the baseball is coming, like the immediate goal is to hit the baseball, but the more long-term goal is, where am I going to be, right? I got to get on base. So I'm kind of thinking it in two different mindsets, right? The immediate mindset, and then what is the meaning, what is more long-term. And what I'm hearing from you is that, like you said, in a capitalistic system, we all need to make money, right? We need to pay the bills, keep the website going, all that stuff, and that's the short-term goal. But then what the follow through, I guess, is, or what the long termness of it is, then to help other people. So that way we can kind of have our cake and eat it too. We can grow a business, we can have success, we can have money, but then the driving force, or like the more long-term goal, is to help people. And so that way it's not mutually exclusive, right? We don't have to either be the person that makes a bunch of money, and we don't have to be the person that just gives everything away for free. We can do both, but it's that what I'm hearing from you, at least, or the way I'm understanding it, is that capitalism is a system that we need to live in because that's how everything runs, and we should want to build our business, and we should want to make as many sales as possible of a product, but then the more long-term goal is to help others.
Absolutely. I mean, I tell every one of my clients, and when I start working with them, I say you're going to have massive increases in your business as far as financially. Your bottom line will increase, and I want them to have massive increases. I think there's plenty to go around in the capitalistic system, and I think everybody should have as much as they can handle. And if 10 million is enough, then that's enough. If it's 50, if it's 100 million, you can have that in a capitalistic system. The key is that you do it the right way by taking care of people, not exploiting. And if you start business, if every interaction you have is about helping others in a capitalistic system, you cannot help but be successful because people do business with those they know, like, and trust. And so if they know, like, and trust you, and you're sincere and you're honest and you're forthright and you offer great quality, you cannot help but be successful in a capitalistic system. But I definitely, Robert, I agree. I want people in this system to realize the power that they have, and that there's not enough entrepreneurs out there. They need to keep coming. And the things that you're offering, I think, I think of all sorts of people that I know right now who could benefit from what you're offering and helping people build businesses online. I think it's a great market. It's an untapped market. But if they're doing it for the right reasons, they're going to be successful, and they're not going to look back with regret. They're going to look back and say, I love this. I love how I did it. And I use this money to benefit others even more.
Cool. So along those lines of getting people, I guess, aligned to where they need to be, along the lines of getting people to dig themselves out of whatever problem they're in, or getting them to help people. I understand that you have some of these helpful tools that will do that. I understand that you have, a website, podcast, services, products, books. So can we
hmm
talk about you? Can you tell us what you have and what people should go and get?
Sure. I think based on the context of this meeting, this interaction we've had today, I think my book, A Clear View, is a great resource for unleashing the power of a positive self-image. You can get that on Amazon.com. It's just A Clear View by Michael B. Ross. Or you can get on our website, which is mainstreamls.com, and you can find our resources there. And then again, if anyone would want a one-on-one session, they can schedule that with my assistant, Rhonda. I would love to talk to somebody. I do more, the one-day power punch, unleashing the positive self-image in a person in one day, just trying to break through and get to the core of what's causing them to have a negative self-image. And then I have 3 other coaches on staff that can also coach a more long-term process if needs be. But I'd definitely like to get this message out more. I'm a speaker, love to get out and speak some more to groups. I just got back from speaking at Missouri and Missouri State to a couple of groups there. It was great. So more of those things are great. But I want people to live from their center and live from their essence. So anything I can do to help, I'd love to do that.
Awesome. I mean, that sounds like a great attitude and a great message. So, mainstreamls.com to get that one-on-one session, and then A Clear View on Amazon. I mean, thanks so much, Mike, for sharing your story and sharing your thoughts and getting people to where they need to be. I really appreciate it. So everyone they shouldn't walk to mainstreamls.com. They should run as fast as they possibly can. If you're in the car, pull the car over and write this down, mainstreamls.com. If you're at the computer, go there right now and check out what Michael Ross has to say for you and show for you. So thanks again, Mike, for coming on the show and being very helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's Robert Plank. Did you have a chance to give us a 5-star rating yet if you think we deserved it? If not, go right now to robertplank.com/iTunes. That's ROBERTPLANK/ITUNES.